Good evening to everyone who's joined us so far. I'm just going to give a minute or two for everyone else that's registered to join us tonight. So just give me a couple of minutes before we get started here. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started and everyone can continue to join us as we go along in the presentation. So good evening to everyone on the call tonight and welcome to Election Markham's candidate and third-party advertiser information session. My name is Erica Alligood and I identify with the pronouns she and her. I will be moderating tonight's session, very excited to be here. Now, before getting started, Elections Markham acknowledges the land we are hosting this virtual session from are the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples and their commitment to stewardship of the land. We acknowledge the communities in circle, the north, west, south, and eastern directions, and Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, Seneca, Chippewa, and the current treaty holders, Mississaugas of the Credit Peoples. We share the responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure the dish is never empty and to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. We are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. Now, please also note that today's webinar is being recorded. And to ensure an inclusive experience, closed captioning is available by clicking the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen. Now, following the presentation, there will be a question and answer period, and you can use the Q&A function also at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and we will do our best to address most of the inquiries tonight. I'd now like to take a moment to introduce today's presenter. Now, this information session tonight will be conducted by Scott Chapman, the Elections Manager at Elections Markham. And following the presentation, the question and answer participants will include Kimberly Kitteringham, our returning officer, Martha Pettit, our assistant returning officer, Michael Blackburn, election communications and community engagement manager, and of course, Scott Chapman, our elections manager. Now over to you, Scott.
Great, thanks, Erica. And I just want to echo your comments. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here with us tonight. Those who may have attended our first info session will remember me saying it's always very exciting for us to be able to connect with folks who might be looking to get involved with our elections at the city, and becoming a candidate or third-party advertiser is certainly a wonderful opportunity to do just that. Just to give everyone a bit of orientation, I'm going to start our comments tonight by talking a little bit about who we are and the work we do at Elections Markham before getting into the real substance of the webinar, which is really about the offices, who can be a candidate or third-party advertiser, how to actually register if you're still thinking about it. And then we'll touch on what the election itself will actually look like, the ways people can vote in 2022, and some of the accessible services that we're very proud to be offering. So a little bit about us. During election years, those of us on the panel today and our wonderful colleagues form the team we know as Elections Markham. And we are an independent, nonpartisan division of the city of Markham that's responsible for conducting municipal elections for our city council and local school boards. We work under the direction of and leadership of the city clerk as a returning officer who's on the call tonight. And we operate independent of political influence to support the fair and transparent delivery of that mandate. And as an office, I'd say something we're always very excited about is doing, new and interesting and innovative things in how we run our elections. And that's really with the goal of creating an accessible and inclusive experience that empowers everyone to participate as equal partners in their local government. Now, in Ontario, municipal elections are held every 4 years in October. They are regulated by provincial law, which sets out general timelines and requirements. And the law also appoints the city clerk as the independent authority over really how the election is actually delivered. And that includes things like when, where, and how voters cast their ballot, for instance. And again, the reason for this is to support certain guiding principles that we know to be critical to free and fair elections. Principles like integrity, secrecy, accessibility, fairness, transparency, public confidence, and some of the other ones listed on the slide here. Now, in this fall's election, Markham voters will be electing candidates for both city council and their local school boards. And immediately, that's something that really makes municipal elections particularly unique and exciting compared to maybe other types of elections, is that there's not just one office that voters see and get to vote for on their ballot, but there's actually several. So for our city council, there's the office of mayor, which is one position elected citywide by all of our voters in Markham. Likewise, there's the office of regional councillor, and there are actually 4 of those positions available, and those 2 are elected by all Markham voters. We do also have 8 ward councillors who sit on Markham City Council, and those people are elected by the voters within that particular section of the city. And also on the ballot are candidates for school board trustee. Trustees are elected positions in Ontario, and there are 4 different school boards that cover Markham. There's the York Region District School Board and the York Catholic District School Board, for which there are multiple offices that each represent a couple of different wards. And we also have our French school boards, Viamont and Mont Avenir. Those trustees actually represent all of York Region. And a question that we get asked sometimes as the election office is, well, what exactly do these offices do? And generally speaking, I'd say what a city councilor does and what a school board trustee does are actually very similar. They both form part of a larger board of directors, be it city council or the school board. And with their colleagues, they set the overall policy direction for their constituency. They manage the use of public funds given to them for important local services that people rely on every day. And they direct the delivery of those services based on a couple of things, based on the needs of the people who elect them, and also with the support of professional staff. The services city council manages include things like fire and emergency services, planning and development, recycling and waste management, business licensing, parks and local road maintenance, community centers and libraries. There are, of course, a number of other areas, but those are just some of them. And school boards make decisions over things of importance to local education and their student bodies. So things like school buildings and equipment, textbooks and learning materials within provincially determined guidelines. Monitoring academic performance is something that trustees are responsible for. Providing for special education and support services is another. So that's a little bit about the roles themselves. And for anyone who might be thinking about running for office on Markham City Council, you can do so if you're a Canadian citizen, if you're at least 18 years old, and if you're a Markham resident, property owner, or tenant. There are a couple of exceptions that might apply to a very small group of people. For example, if you were, say, a City of Markham employee currently receiving pay, if you were a judge, if you were an elected official at another level of government or a senator, you would not be allowed to run for city council. The question that we get asked fairly often is, if I'm thinking about running for city council, do I have to run in the ward where I live? And the answer to that is no. As long as you live, own, or rent property in Markham, anywhere in Markham, you can run for any office on city council. So that's something not everyone is aware of. Now, for those who are interested in possibly being a school board trustee, the rules around who can be a candidate are very similar. You do have to be a Canadian citizen and at least 18 years old, but you don't actually have to live in Markham. You can live anywhere within the school board's jurisdiction, which for all of our school boards is York Region. So even if someone lives in a neighboring municipality, Markham that is within York Region, that person can run for a trustee office that represents Markham voters. Another point is that for our Catholic and French school board seats, you do have to be eligible to vote for that school board, and that could mean something specific depending on the particular board. So for example, if you wanted to run for one of our Catholic school boards, you'd have to be of Roman Catholic faith. And if you wanted to run for one of the French language school boards, your first language would have to be French. So those are a little, some additional criteria specific to those school boards. And like with city council, there are a few exceptions to who can run. The one I'd say that tends to come up most is that if you're an employee of any school board, you're not actually allowed to run as a trustee. That includes both full and part-time employees. What you have to do is if you were in a if you were a full or part-time paid employee, you'd have to take an unpaid leave of absence before registering as a trustee. And that would be part of becoming part of the registration process for those offices. Now, with that, if you're thinking about becoming a candidate in Markham, and we would certainly encourage anyone who may be here tonight who's interested, there are a few things to keep in mind. You do have to register with our office before doing anything campaign related. So like fundraising, spending money towards an election. After that, the role of a candidate is very much one of ambassadorship for the election. So talking to voters and finding out what matters to them, getting people excited to vote. All candidates are expected to run a campaign that's respectful of voters and other candidates. You know, the great thing about our community in Markham, and Erica alluded to it really in our land acknowledgement, and it's something that hopefully we hope is reflected in our local government, is the wonderful diversity of opinion and freedom of choice that people are encouraged to have. It is important that candidates always share accurate information about the election so that voters can make free and informed choices. And of course, our office is very much here to support you in that. The city does have a number of important bylaws, policies, and guidelines that we follow during an election, and it's important that candidates do as well. And we'll get into more of this in a minute, but there are some fairly strict rules around campaign finance, and rules around other election laws. So it's important that those are followed as well. Another important piece to our elections is something called third-party advertising. And some of you here tonight might be particularly interested in this. Under our election law municipally, third-party advertising means something very specific. It's any form of paid advertising that promotes, supports, or opposes a registered candidate and is put out by someone who is not a registered candidate. There are really three pieces there. One, it carries a cost value. Two, it's directed at a specific candidate. And three, it's published by someone who's not a candidate. Now, during an election, you might see things like people expressing their opinions interpersonally through no-cost activities, and maybe even people who are paying for ads that target a generic political or social issue rather than a registered candidate. For instance, things you might see are advertisements encouraging people, to support local businesses or those promoting environmental sustainability, for instance. But if something isn't paid and it doesn't reference a particular candidate, then it isn't considered third-party advertising. And why does that matter? Well, I bring that up is because if someone wants to pay for advertisements about a candidate in an upcoming election, very much like with candidates, there are rules around who's exactly allowed to do it and what they can and can't do. So for starters, if you're thinking about becoming a third-party advertiser in Markham, you do have to register with our office, just as candidates do. And to register as a third-party advertiser, you need to be either a resident of Ontario, not necessarily Markham, but just anywhere in Ontario, or a corporation or trade union that does business in Ontario. And again, that's very specific. Businesses or groups that are not legally corporations or unions can't be third-party advertisers, nor can, say, political parties. Now, if and when someone decides to become a third-party advertiser, they do have to register with us before producing or publishing any political advertisement. As I mentioned, they're only allowed to register if they're advertising about a specific candidate, either in support or opposition. And they have to make sure that their advertisements identify them by name and contact information so that it's clear who the ad belongs to. But just like with candidates, their job really is to get people excited to vote, to run a respectful campaign, to share accurate information about the election, to follow those same city bylaws, policies, and guidelines that we mentioned, and to follow campaign finance rules and other election law. Now, I've mentioned campaign finance a few times, and we have a few more details on that here because this really is one of the areas that's most important for a new candidate or third-party advertiser, primarily because the rules are so specific and they are quite strict. Now, more information is openly available on campaign finance on our website, electionsmarkham.ca. And we have a number of resources there through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. We'd certainly encourage anyone who has perhaps already registered or is thinking about it to consult and follow those rules closely. But generally speaking, whether you're a candidate for any office or a third-party advertiser, you do have to register before you do any fundraising or election-related activity. You do have to open a dedicated bank account and use only that for any election activity. If and when you do register, every candidate and third-party advertiser is given one or more spending limits, and you do have to stay within them. Similarly, there are limits on who and how much you can legally accept in donation. So candidates specifically are only allowed to accept personal donations from people who live in Ontario. So a candidate can accept a donation from a business or a group or from someone who lives in another province or country. It does have to be from an Ontario resident. And if you do have someone from Ontario who's willing to donate to you, the most they can give is $1,200 to any one candidate, that is. But they can't give, that same person can't give more than $5,000 total candidates on the same council or school board. Now, it can be straightforward enough to make sure that you yourself as a candidate or a third party don't accept more than $1,200 from any one person. Actually, you should always ask if before you accept a donation, if that person has donated to anyone else in the same election, because if what they give you puts them over that $5,000 limit total, then both you and the donor could either be fined or receive some other penalty under the election law. So it is very important to keep that in mind. Candidates and third parties need to maintain detailed and accurate financial records of everything they spend or receive. And that's really because after the election's over, they are legally required to file what's called a campaign financial statement. And that's basically a report proving that they've followed all the campaign rules that I just talked about. Just a little bit on election signs here, because we know this is always an exciting thing for candidates and advertisers, is that both candidates and third parties are allowed to put up election signs, but there are certain rules around a couple of things. So the dimensions of those signs, when exactly and for how long the signs can go up in the city of Markham, and where exactly they can go up. The city does issue a couple of different permits for election signs, and you do need to buy at least one of those permits in order to put election signs up. The first permit that we offer at the city is for private lawns and designated local road intersections. And the second is for designated regional road intersections. So for anyone who registers as a candidate or third party and is interested, permits will be available closer to the time when signs can go up, which for this election is September 26th to October 24th. And we're actually going to be hosting a couple of dedicated sign workshops later this summer and into the fall. So stay tuned for those if you are interested. Now, for people who are brand new to elections and maybe a little bit nervous about the idea of fundraising, one other piece that we like to bring up is a program that's offered by the city called the Candidate Contribution Rebate Program. And basically, this is a campaign subsidy program of sorts. It's designed to help candidates fundraise and reduce some of the barriers for people who may be doing this for the first time. And how it works is that if you're running for an office on Markham City Council and you get a donation from it of at least $50 from someone who's either a Markham voter or a permanent resident of living in Markham, that person can apply to the city and get 75% of their donation back to a maximum of $150. And to that, the city will actually cover the cost of the rebate on the candidate's behalf. It is a program that's exclusive to Markham City Council candidates, so it's not available to trustee candidates or to third-party advertisers. But it is something that we like to promote because it can be a fairly useful support for someone who might not otherwise think about running for office, because we know it can be intimidating for people who maybe have never done it before. And again, there's quite a bit of information on this on our website if anyone would like to learn more. Now, for anyone who's maybe still thinking about registering as a candidate, there's still some time left. You can register anytime before August 19th at 2 p.m. That is the cutoff, 2 p.m. In the afternoon on August 19th. This election, we're pleased to announce that we've gone completely digital and are accepting registrations online through electionsmarkham.ca/candidate registration. There are full step-by-step instructions on how to register, but essentially we ask you to scan or take a picture of a few pieces of ID. We have fillable forms that you can complete and electronically sign right from your computer, and we do have samples online of what those forms look like, in case you'd like to have a peek before making any decisions. Once you send those to us, you can book a one-on-one meeting with our team where we'll walk you through some of the more detailed rules and help get you off on the right foot. There is a fee to register. It's $100 to $200 depending on the office you're interested in. The nice thing is that this fee will, in most cases, be refunded to you after the election, as long as you follow all of the campaign finance rules and file a post-election campaign financial statement. I'll just note as well that for people who are interested in one of our city council offices, before you can actually submit your forms, there is a requirement to collect signatures from at least 25 Markham voters who are endorsing your candidacy. And there is a specific set of forms for those signatures, forms that those signatures need to be recorded in. And those can be downloaded anytime from that same page on our website, electionsmarkham.ca/candidate registration. That is specific to Markham City Council candidates. School board trustees aren't required to collect signatures. Of course, if anyone needs any help at all at any point in this process, please feel very welcome to let us know, and we're always very happy to assist. Third-party advertisers can also register online, and the page for that is electionsmarkham.ca/political advertising. And that can be done anytime up until October 21st at 5 p.m. Like with candidates, third parties will be asked to scan or take a picture of their IDs, complete and electronically sign a few fillable forms, and to book a one-on-one appointment with us. There's no fee to register as a third-party advertiser. However, if you're registering on behalf of a corporation or a trade union, you do need a letter of authorization or some other proof that you are authorized to act on behalf of the corporation or trade union and register them as a third-party advertiser. So that's registering. What we wanted to do at this point is to talk a little bit about what the election itself will actually look like and the services that will be available to our voters. Now, something that not everyone may know is that the municipal election cycle is actually quite long, and the work that we do at Elections Markham actually extends long before and after voting takes place in the fall. So this is just a very brief snapshot of the roadmap ahead of us and some of the key milestones that we're looking forward to. First, we have the candidate and third-party advertiser registration period, which we're currently in the middle of. And that goes all the way up until, as I mentioned, August 19th at 2 p.m. for candidates and October 21st for third-party advertisers. Starting September 1st, every candidate who registers will get a copy of the voters list for their electoral district. The voters list contains the names and addresses of everyone who's registered to vote for the candidate's particular office. So it can be quite helpful to candidates in canvassing for support ahead of the election. Candidates can start putting up election signs as of September 26th until final voting day, which is October 24th. As I mentioned, the city issues permits for those and enforces rules related to placement and safety. This year, voting days will run from October 14th to the 24th, and that will feature a few different options for voters, which I'll talk about in a minute. Once the election results are in, there is a period of about 3 weeks until the next council term begins, and that's on the next council and school board term, that is, and that is on November 15th. The campaign period for all candidates ends on January 3rd of 2023, so that's the last day that candidates can actually raise funds. I spoke about this a moment ago, but after the election, candidates and third parties have to file a campaign financial statement documenting their campaign activity. And the deadline to do that for everybody is March 31st of 2023. There are penalties associated, as I mentioned, with not filing a financial statement or filing one improperly. So there's quite a bit of education and service that we provide during this time. Any voter can ask for a compliance audit of a candidate's financial records, and they can do that within 90 days of that March 31st filing deadline. And during this same time, our office reviews all reported campaign donations to determine whether any donation limits have been exceeded. And finally, once the compliance audit deadlines pass, our office issues those contribution rebates, typically starting in around the following October. Now, with every election, we're always very conscientious about providing the most inclusive, accessible, and responsive services possible. And to that, we've really tried to build our service model in 2022 on a combination of sources and insights. Certainly that includes the laws that govern our elections, also a number of corporate strategy documents that we have at the City of Markham that speak to access and inclusivity, ongoing research and testing for all of our systems, and ultimately extensive and ongoing feedback from all of our partners and stakeholders, including both candidates, or including all of candidates, third parties, and voters. No decision that we ever make is made in isolation, but it's very much informed by constant feedback through things like surveys and other data sources. And we think that this is very well represented in what we're putting forward this year. Some of you watching tonight may know that the City of Markham is really a leader in multi-platform election services. We always offer voters quite a few different ways of casting their ballot, depending on what works best for them. So this year, between October 14th to the 24th, any voter can vote online anywhere that they might be able to access the internet. That could be from home, it could be from work, school, on a transit trip, or on vacation perhaps. Within that same window, between October 20th to the 22nd, any voter can vote in person with a paper ballot at any voting place across the city, no matter what ward they may live in. And we will have several voting places available throughout Markham during those days. If someone doesn't have the internet, if they need help, or if they just want to vote in person on final voting day, which is, as I mentioned, October 24th, there will be touchscreen devices at several voting places across Markham. And again, voters can come to any one of those, no matter where they may live in the city. And lastly, we're offering about a week of in-person paper ballot voting at our returning office, which is the Markham Civic Center, and that's by appointment. So if someone wants to vote in person, but they can't make any of those 4 days where we'll be in the community, they can make an appointment with us and we'll have a ballot for them at the Civic Center. That's voting itself. As far as who can vote, you do have to be, in order to vote, a Canadian citizen, at least 18 years old, a Markham resident, property owner, or tenant, or the spouse of one, and you also have to be registered to vote. A question that we sometimes get is whether permanent residents can vote, and the answer to that is no, you do have to be a Canadian citizen. But something else that not everyone knows is that you don't actually have to live in Markham in order to vote here. That's different from what people might be used to for say federal or provincial elections, where someone can vote once in respect of their residence, even if they own multiple properties in different cities or towns. But municipally, a person can vote in as many cities or towns as they own or rent property. They can only vote once in the city of Markham, but they could also vote somewhere else if they own or rent, say, a summer home or an investment property in another town. But I do just want to take a minute to talk about this last point about being registered to vote. Everyone who votes in this fall's election has to be registered to vote on what's called the voters list, which I mentioned just a few moments ago. But what's important here is that not everyone who's eligible to vote may currently be on the voters list. The good news is that it's very easy to check if you are, in fact, on the voters list. So anyone who's a Canadian citizen, 18 or older, and a Markham resident, property owner, or tenant can check if they're registered in a couple of different ways. So they can do so online at electionsmarkham.ca/register. And we do have a tool available on our website right now. It's very easy to use, and we would certainly encourage anyone who's interested in participating in the election in whatever capacity to make sure that they are registered, and take a few minutes to do that on our website. A few other ways that someone can check if they're registered or register if they're not is to do so in person at a Markham Public Library branch, and that starts on September 1st. They can also do so at any voting place in Markham during those 4 days of in-person voting. Voters who are registering to vote for the first time will be asked for ID to prove that they are in fact eligible to vote. We certainly encourage, as I mentioned though, that for anyone who's able to check earlier rather than later, because everyone who is registered on the voters list will get a voter information letter in October, just before voting days themselves, on when and how to vote, including a personal voting pin to vote online. And again, we certainly encourage anyone who can check the voters list to do so now, so that we get them that letter in good time when voting rolls around in the fall. In terms of our voting places for in-person voting, we are offering a select number of facilities that we call Vote Anywhere locations. And what that means is that anyone can vote at any one of them, regardless of where they live. We don't use polling subdivisions like we see federally and provincially. But with this, anyone can go into any one of our facilities and get a ballot with their specific ward councillor and school board trustee candidates. So that's quite an accessible service for those who might be looking to vote in person. All of our voting places will be open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on those 4 days where the in-person option is available. And all of our voting places are currently listed on our website. A full list is available at electionsmarkham.ca/voting places. If for anyone who is interested, you can find those there. Now here we just have a couple of infographics illustrating what the experience in 2022 will look like for voters. For remote online voting, which again will be available during all voting days from October 14th to the 24th. Ideally, the voter will check that they're registered on the voters list and at the correct address. They, as I mentioned, can do that online at our election information website as early as today. As I mentioned, everyone who is registered will receive a voter information letter with a personal online voting pin. And with that, they'll be able to vote online any time of the day, anywhere that they can access the internet during that window. Once the voter submits their ballot, they'll be asked to complete an optional voter experience survey. This is really an invaluable part of our outreach and continuous improvement policy that we have here at Elections Markham. And something that's new this year is that once the voter casts their ballot online, they'll be given an encrypted QR code receipt that they can use to reconfirm their selections after their ballot's been cast using an app from their smartphone. Voters don't have to do this in order for their ballot to be counted. It's entirely optional, but it is available for anyone who is maybe looking for some additional assurance. During those 3 days from October 20th to the 22nd, if someone wants to vote with a paper ballot in person, they'll again check that they're on the voters list. They'll be able to go to any voting place in the city, and we will have several of those available during those days. Once they get there, they'll show their voter letter and photo ID to a poll worker, and they'll be given a paper ballot with the list of candidates and trustees based on their address and school support. Once they mark their ballot, they'll cast it through a vote tabulator, and then they can complete an optional survey on their experience. And again, you know, post-vote feedback is always something that we value very much and always encourage people to participate in, no matter how they are voting. And lastly, if someone wants to vote in person on final voting day, which is October 24th, the process will be very much the same as the previous slide. As paper ballots, that is, the voter will check they're on the voters list to make sure that they're registered. They'll go to any voting place in the city. They'll check in with a poll worker, but instead of voting with a paper ballot, they'll be directed to a touchscreen iPad that's connected to our online voting platform. And they'll be given a receipt to complete that optional online survey from home. So here, again, the process of casting the ballot is the exact same as if the person had voted from home. But if they need help, if the voter needs help, or they want that social experience of doing it in person on the last day, they can certainly do that here. Now, beyond these services, we will have a couple of different special voting options available as well. We have what's called a home assistance program, where if someone can't access the internet and they aren't physically able to make it to a voting place, we will send our staff to them to deliver a ballot at their home. We will also be offering a special ballot option for voters at long-term care facilities, where we would hand deliver ballot kits and pick them up after everyone's had a chance to get one. That's really recognizing that these continue to be particularly high-risk settings, and we want to make sure that everyone feels safe and comfortable voting. We also have a voter helpline that's active all year, and where voters can get support in over 150 languages, as well as a 24 assistant virtual assistant on our website, where people can ask questions about the election and get an instant response any time of day. And that's something that is active right now on our website. So here, I just wanted to highlight some of the accessible features we have in place for in-person voting. Certainly, all of our voting rooms will adhere to accessible design standards with proper interior spacing to support efficient mobility, while also being mindful of public health protocols. There will be information and signage displayed in multiple languages with staff available to assist, again, to really create the most inclusive and welcoming experience possible. And something that we do in Markham, which I think really sets us apart from other elections, is that we offer assistive technology at our polls. And this allows us to support voters with a wide range of abilities in marking their ballot independently. So for paper ballot voting days, there will be ballot magnifying and contrast adjustment tools, audio support, easy grip pens, braille keypads, and alternate input control devices like paddle buttons and sip and puff straws. And of course, these are all things that we will continue and are continuing to promote throughout the year to make people aware of these opportunities. For in-person voting on October 24th, which will feature those touchscreens I mentioned, we'll also be offering a number of accessibility supports. Again, all of our facilities will adhere to accessible design. There will be multi-language supports available. Our platform is fully accessible based on AODA standards. It's also compatible with personal assistive devices, and it integrates with assistive software that can be downloaded for free from our website at electionsmarkham.ca. And those are both features that voters can take full advantage of from home or wherever they might be, if that's their preference. And of course, if a voter wants to bring someone they know or ask an election worker for help, they can certainly do that here as well. So I know we've covered a lot here today, and hopefully I haven't talked too much. I'm sure folks are eager to get into the question period. So I want to thank everyone again for their time, and I guess Erica, I'll turn it back over to you and welcome any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott, for that very detailed presentation. I will invite the rest of the session's participants to turn their cameras on for the Q&A period. And just reminding all of our participants today as well that there is a Q&A button just at the bottom of that Zoom screen. So you can submit your questions and we'll go through them now with our panelists and try to answer as many questions as we can. So we have gotten a couple so far. I'll just let our panelists come on screen here. Now, the first question that we have here has to do with third-party advertisers. So the question from this individual is, when third-party advertisers contact candidates to understand their positions on specific issues, what special rules are in place regarding their communications with each other?
Eric, I'd be happy to answer it. It's Kimberly Kitteringham. There aren't any specific rules governing the interactions, I would say, between third-party advertisers and candidates. The province has, however, prepared quite a detailed third-party advertiser guide that I would encourage all third-party advertisers to certainly read and become familiar with. As a general rule, however, my advice is always to be transparent in an election with respect to your actions. So my advice is certainly to identify yourself as a third-party advertiser when you are contacting candidates. Third-party advertising is a relatively new phenomenon in Canada. It's existed in the States for quite some time. So you may, as a third-party advertiser, come across candidates, and likely would be the case in Markham, who are very unfamiliar with what a third-party advertiser does. So I wouldn't, don't be surprised if you are a third-party advertiser, and when you reach out to candidates, they kind of, question what that is. But certainly, do take a read of the guide, because there are specific obligations and requirements for third-party advertisers. But again, in terms of specific rules involving how to engage with candidates, that's not specifically enumerated in the Act.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Great question, and some more great questions coming in now. So this one's related to the campaign bank account. I think I'll pass this one over to Scott. The question is, does the name of the bank account have to be a different name than candidate personal account name in order to avoid audit complication?
No, so that's a great question, Erica. And the campaign bank account that a third party or a candidate opens it doesn't, there are no rules around a specific name that the account has to be in. It can be in the candidate's own name. That is something different than folks might be used to if they have any experience with federal or provincial elections. Typically with those, there are specific rules around what type of account gets opened, who can be a signing authority on the campaign bank account. Actually, federally and provincially, candidates are required to have a chief financial officer and have sort of a separation of responsibility and oversight over the campaign bank account. But those are not elements that are in place for municipal and school board candidates or third-party advertisers at the municipal level. So the account can be in the candidate's own name. The candidate can be a signing authority on their own bank account, and they're not required to appoint a chief financial officer. One of the tools or resources, I guess, that we equip our candidates and our third parties with when they are going through the process of opening a campaign bank account is a letter from our city clerk and returning officer to provide some clarity to banks, because it's something that we tend to see throughout our election cycles. Specifically, I'd say the last couple, because we have been sort of on the heels of a provincial election where banks are maybe familiar with the rules as they relate to provincial elections. We like to provide that letter as a little bit of extra clarity, just to confirm to the banks that the rules, the campaign finance framework around municipal candidates is different. And as far as rules or restrictions around, a name that a campaign account is in, while there's some stricter rules that exist at the federal and provincial level, those don't exist municipally. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that campaign bank accounts aren't audited by political parties or compliance authorities as a standard course of business. If there are some conditions where a candidate or a third party, depending on how much they spend or receive, would have to get the professional auditor of their own choosing to verify their campaign finances. But that's really just making sure that they adhere to the rules that are in place. There aren't any rules around specific naming of a campaign bank account.
Thanks so much,
I
Scott.
just wanted to
Oh, sorry,
add,
go ahead, Kimberly.
I just wanted to add a few comments to Scott's very fulsome answer. And it's just the whole idea, the whole area of campaign finance to new candidates in particular is something that causes quite a bit of concern. Obviously, people want to behave in a fashion that's in compliance with the act and is transparent. So I would really encourage those candidates who have run before or who are considering running to consult with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing's candidates guide. They have a guide that has quite a significant section on campaign finances, as you can imagine, because they can be quite complex. And I would just add to Scott's comments that if you do not have to open a campaign account if you do not spend any money and do not receive any contributions of money. If you receive contributions of goods and services, but no contributions of money, you do not have to open a campaign account. So that's also something that's important to note as well.
Thank you so much, Scott and Kimberly. I'm just going to actually jump forward a few questions because this question that came in has to do with the campaign bank account as well. So this individual has stated, if your bank is requesting a letter from the city specifically stating the position that they're running for and their name as confirmed by the city to open that campaign bank account, where should they go or who should they contact to obtain that?
So during our, I can answer that, Erica. That's another good question. So during our, I had mentioned a little bit the process of registering as a candidate or a third-party advertiser. Part of that includes meeting with myself and other members of our team to go over some of these rules in a little bit more detail. Ultimately, as Kimberly indicated, the onus for following campaign, ensuring compliance with election law does fall on the candidate. We do provide some resources to help candidates with the process of opening a bank account. One is that letter that I had mentioned that clarifies some of the idiosyncrasies around municipal elections to clarify any points of confusion with the bank. Another thing that we always encourage candidates to do, candidates and third parties for that matter, is to take a copy of their countersigned registration or nomination paper once they are officially registered with us. That is, that's a document that they will sign through that online process that I outlined a little bit earlier. All candidates and third parties will get a copy of their registration paperwork, and they'll be able to take that to the bank with them. That, in most cases, I would say, should serve as authoritative proof that they are a registered participant and therefore able to open a bank account in the name of an election campaign. But if ever there's any confusion, we have had in certain instances where banks have contacted us and we just provide some additional confirmation as an office, and we're very pleased to do that for any of our candidates or registered third parties who may need that assistance, is to direct inquiries to our office once they are registered.
Thanks so much for clarifying that, Scott. The next question here, they're just looking for some potential more information that you may have about that verification app you were going over with us. If you could maybe explain a little bit further, Scott.
Yeah, so this is something that's new this year. As I mentioned, the post-vote verify component to the ballot. Basically, for those who may not have who I may not have described it fully during my presentation, is that the voter casts their ballot. They'll be given an encrypted QR code receipt that they can use to revalidate their selections after their ballot's been cast using this app, which will be on their smartphone. So, so at the end of the ballot they submit, they get this receipt, they're able to open the app, scan the QR code, re-authenticate using their same login that they would have used to access the ballot. And then that will give them a temporary snapshot of their selections to as they are stored in the digital ballot box. So, one of the things that folks who are new to online voting might bring up is that how can someone know that a ballot's been recorded properly once it's been cast and once and before it reaches the digital ballot box. So with our platform this year and with this verify component, voters do have the ability to verify their selections after their ballot's been cast if they want that extra assurance. And if their selections aren't captured correctly, the app gives them a process to rectify it. So it is a really innovative and breakthrough technology that we think will really go a long way in really continuing the strong level of trust that we know Markham voters have in online voting. It is online voting is the preferred method of voting by Markham voters, and we know that based on a number of elections over the last 20 years to feature an online voting program, including our last election 4 years ago in 2018, where over 90% of ballots cast were online. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit around the Verify app.
Thanks so much, Scott. Now, this person here, I hope I read this question correctly. It says September 1st, 2022 is the start of voting at public library. So I'm not sure if maybe, Scott, you could remind the attendees where they can find our voting places and some of those key dates.
Yeah, so great question. So a lot of, I would say the best source of information and the most authoritative source of the official source of information, election information, is our election website. So electionsmarkham.ca. There is quite a bit of information on there right now around voting places, where exactly someone can vote in person during the days where we will be offering in-person voting, as well as that information I shared earlier in the presentation around ways to vote. So in Markham this year, we are offering voters a couple of different ways to vote. Online voting between October 14th and the 24th. That's from anywhere they can access the internet. From October 20th to the 22nd, we do have that in-person paper ballot voting option. And then on October 24th, we have in-person voting through touchscreen devices again at our voting places. So I think anyone who's looking for maybe some more of that information, electionsmarkham.ca is really a great source, and there's a lot there on the different pieces related to ways to vote and how to vote, where to vote if someone is thinking about voting in person, as well as some of those accessible voting options that I spoke about in the presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott. This next question, they've asked, is September 26th the first day we can also distribute flyers, door hangers, etc., and go door to door speaking to voters?
So I'm happy to take that one again. So the answer is no. The September 26th date is specific to election signs. So election signs in the city of Markham are subject to specific bylaws. We called that one out in particular because we know for candidates and third-party advertisers, election signs can be an exciting way of getting their name out there and letting people know that they're running for office or participating in the election. But for candidates and third parties, essentially, once they have registered with our office and they have paid their fee, if they're a candidate, if they're a third party, there is no fee. But once they've registered, they've paid that fee, and they've opened a campaign bank account, they can start producing campaign materials and distributing those. So if someone so once a candidate or a third party registers, they can start printing, campaign flyers. They can start spending money on their election campaign. They just have to be officially registered and to have that campaign bank account open first.
Great. So I have two questions that I think kind of go hand in hand. So I'll combine them for you and I'll throw it over likely to Scott again. I think you'll be able to answer this one pretty smoothly. So one question was, how much money can a candidate spend? And there's another question, how much as a candidate can we give to our own campaign? Is there a limit?
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for that question. Every candidate who's running in the election and third parties as well, they are subject to a couple of different spending limits. And those spending limits are determined on a office by office basis, depending on the number of registered voters who are eligible to vote for that office. So for candidates, there is a general spending limit, which is kind of what they can spend in total for the election. There is a self-funding limit, which applies to both the candidate and their spouse. That's what they can put towards their own campaign. Another limit that not a lot of people know about, but there is a limit on parties and expressions of appreciation. So there are a couple of different limits that a candidate or a third-party advertiser does need to be aware of when they do go through the process of registering. That's one of the items that our office covers in detail, is providing candidates with those spending limits, candidates and third parties with those spending limits, so that they're in good position that when they do start campaigning, they know what they need to stay within as far as how much they are spending, how much they're receiving from campaign contributors, and how much they may be spending towards their own campaign.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, some more great questions coming up here. Now, this person is asking about the endorsement signatures that you mentioned, Scott, as part of your presentation. They're asking, do the persons of 25 signatures have to reside in the ward that you are running for?
No, so that's a great question. They do not have to live in the ward for the candidate that they are endorsing. It can be any eligible Markham voter. So anyone who lives, owns, or rents property in the city of Markham. Of course, being a Canadian citizen and being 18 years old or over, but they don't have to live in the ward for the candidate that they are endorsing. Another piece on that too is that a Markham voter can endorse multiple candidates. So if they'd like to, sign the endorsement forms for multiple candidates who might be running for Markham City Council or for a school board, they can certainly do that, as long as they are a Canadian citizen, at least 18 years old, and a owner or an owner, tenant or resident of property in Markham.
Awesome. This question is, can someone donate on someone's behalf in the bank while making it known and identifying who they are donating on behalf of, because they do not have access to technology? Who will get the receipt in this case, or how might the receipt be issued?
So typically in a case like this, and I would say really any comments that we make on campaign finance, I would encourage everyone to consult those guides that Kimberly had mentioned, because it really is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that provides guidance on matters of policy interpretation when it comes to campaign finance. But generally speaking, a donation does need to be made by the individual who is making it. If it because there are rules, as I mentioned at a part in my presentation, there are rules around how much an individual can give. They are subject to limits. It also does have to be someone who is a resident of Ontario. So typically the practice is that anyone who is giving a donation has to be making that donation themselves, and not making them through a proxy, for instance.
Great. Now this question here, for those running as first-time candidates, where can we search to support in running a campaign? So perhaps maybe some resources that might be available.
Sorry, Erica, could you just repeat that question?
Yeah, I'll read it exactly as it reads here, as it was typed in the Q&A box. For those running as first-time candidates, where can we search for support in running a campaign?
I think our website, electionsmarkham.ca, does have some excellent resources. Again, the ones that Kimberly had referred to a little bit earlier in the session. Guides that have been produced by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. That I would say is really the best resource as far as all of the commitments that go into running a campaign, and providing guidance on some frequently asked questions that may come up, particularly for a first-time candidate. So things around campaign finance, campaigning, it's sort of these items that may be new for someone who's running for the first time, is those guides from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and you can find those on our website currently at electionsmarkham.ca.
And Scott, I would just add a few more things. One, Municipal World, if people are familiar with Municipal World, they do have some publications, believe it or not. Some of them are a little dated, but the principles are still relevant today. They have some publications on campaigning for office. So they might be handy. They also have some publications, some kind of magazine type publications that might be handy. The other thing I would say is that, you know, previous candidates who have run for office, I have always found them to be more than willing to speak with people who are running for office for the first time, and to provide them with advice and just, you know, yeah, some advice on how to run a campaign and, you know, things to stay away from, pitfalls. And so definitely tap into candidates who have run in previous elections. It doesn't really even have to be municipal elections. It could be somebody that you know who has run provincially for office or federally. So definitely contact previous candidates. I think that they're a great source of information.
Great, thanks, Scott and Kimberly. Now, this next question here, they're just asking the best ways to reach our office here at Elections Markham. Maybe if you can just note our phone number, the times we're usually available, and maybe an alternate means of contact as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way typically to reach us is our office mailbox or our office phone number. So our mailbox is elections is vote@markham.ca. So that's the way that you can reach our election team in the most the quickest and most efficient way. All of our staff monitor that mailbox, and we will provide a response in the quickest way that we're able to. As well, our phone number is 905-477-7000, and our extension is 8683. A good way to remember that is it's vote. So our extension 8683, vote. And if you visit our election website, electionsmarkham.ca, our contact information is readily available there as well. We are available during office hours between 8 a.m. in the morning, 5 p.m. In the evening, and we make every effort to respond as quickly as possible and to provide as much guidance and support as we can.
And I would just like to say, I know that somebody had indicated they were having issues getting a hold of us. The city has converted over to a new telephone system, so we have had some issues, I think, with our line. If you are experiencing an issue with not being able to get through, please drop us an email, because that's something that we would definitely want to pursue with our information technology and services department. So we definitely want to hear from you. If you're having issues, please do, you know, send us an email so we can address it as soon as possible.
Thank you both again. Now, this next question is, where can we look up statistics about previous elections in Markham, including the use of online voting? Also, where can we look up the results of previous voting surveys conducted by the city?
We do have a number of resources that we regularly post on our election website at electionsmarkham.ca. We did actually go through a refresh and a relaunch of our website just recently. So we are just currently in the process of building that site up. But what I would say is that anyone who's interested in resources about municipal elections, they certainly stay tuned at our website. We do have a resources section that is growing all the time, just as our website is continuing to evolve. And if there's something specific that we can help you with, you know, please feel free to shoot us an email, give us a call, and we'll do our best to assist with any information that we might have that may be of interest to you.
Thanks, Scott. And I think I'll save you some words on this next one. Somebody has asked, where can we see a list of candidates that have registered to confirm our candidacy? It's a very straightforward URL here. I'll give it to you. It's electionsmarkham.ca/registered candidates. So a very easy place to go check as to who has registered thus far. Now, the next question here, can the city recommend where to get a campaign accountant to help complete the financial paperwork at the end of the election?
I can take that one, Erica. We would definitely not get into the business of recommending an auditor to help. That's just not something that Elections Markham would get into. But this is where I would recommend that you speak to candidates who have run in previous elections, because they're typically, for municipal elections, is a small, relatively small number of I think anyway, accounting firms that are familiar with municipal elections campaigns. And I would really encourage you, if you become a registered candidate, to find out that information in advance, because in every municipal election, after a voting day has passed, we do get panicked phone calls from at least a few candidates who are really struggling to find somebody quickly and to meet the legislative timeframes for submitting their financial statement. So definitely talk to other candidates. You can do some of your own research by searching out municipal elections and accountants. And I'm sure previous candidates would be happy to let you know who they've used, but don't leave it to the last minute, I would say, in terms of advice. Get that done nice and early, so it's not something that you have to stress about later on.
Thank you, Kimberly and Scott, and all of our panelists, of course, for this Q&A session. I do not see any further questions coming to us, and I think those were some very helpful responses provided by all of our panelists tonight, which concludes our session today. So I want to thank everyone so much for attending today's candidate and third-party advertiser information session. I do want to note for all of our attendees as well that you will be receiving a survey via email following this session. So we do kindly ask that you do take a few moments just to provide your very valuable feedback, which will definitely help us in preparing any future sessions and any further information for our candidates. And with that, I'd like to wish everyone a great rest of your evening. Thank you all so much for coming.